Alright guys, welcome back to the Tush Mahal. Tush coming at you. It's Wednesday the 1st of November and we are back working on the 68 Triumph TR250 tonight. And if you watched my last video, you've pretty much seen that I've determined to stick with these original fenders that came on the car. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to attempt to make them as fit as best as possible, and that will require making some repairs to things like a flange here. We've got a lot of flange repairs to do down here. We're going to work on the rear fitment, for example, and the rocker fitment's actually not back, or the sill fitment's not bad down the bottom on this side, so I don't think we'll have to do too much there. We'll just be careful when we're making any adjustments that we don't throw anything off that looks good already. That sill obviously needs to be welded on at some point in time, but I'm not going to do that until I'm absolutely sure that we've got the fenders and the door. The door has to go back on at some point. We want to make sure that the door fits properly in there before we go ahead and weld those sills in place. So anyway, I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to work on the rear of the fender first to get this area looking better. And you can see when I close that tight, I've got a bit of a gap here that I've got to work with, or I've got to fix up. This flange here is quite flexible. It's got a crack in it, and it's also got some rust through holes here. It's also got a few holes that are basically drilled, but there's no actual location for them on the inside of this fender. So again, leads me to believe that there's something going on back here. So I've got holes to fill and holes to drill back here to make this actually made up properly. For anybody that doesn't know, there's actually a piece of chrome beading that goes in here between the fenders, so that'll be a good thing to hide some of the ills back here, let's say. But anyway, we'll attempt to get this looking better. So we're going to probably take the fender off first. I'm going to make a few markings as to what I need to do back here first, like for example, this hole here in the flange piece, if you can see that, has no mating hole here on the fender piece. So I want to mark that out and drill the hole in the fender. There's a hole down here that's got a hole drilled on this side, but again, no corresponding hole on this side. So anyway, we're going to do little things like that just to get this project moving in the right direction. There's another small repair I've got to do here. I've got a little bit of tin worm to deal with, so we've got to cut a little piece of metal out here and replace that in there as well. I don't want to just fill that with fiberglass or Bondo, so we're going to repair that properly while we're back here. So lots of little things to do. Anyway, we'll get to it. Alright guys, we've got the door on now, and that's no mean feat considering I had to hold this with one hand. And it's pretty high off the floor now, so I couldn't really sit on a milk crate and balance it on my knee. But if you can imagine holding it in one hand and then reaching around and trying to thread the bolts in from the inside of the body tub to get them lined up with the hinges, it's quite difficult. Anyway, I managed to do it with a little bit of patience, and looks not too bad here at the back. Got a pretty consistent gap from top to bottom. It's a little wide, but not bad. I can always throw, depending on how I can get the front fender to fit, I can always shim the hinges back a little bit to move the door backwards towards the rear fender. But that fender is now right up against, they've got all three fasteners in against the B-post on the inside, so that's as far forward as that's going to pull. So the only other option to reduce that gap is to really move it backwards. And like I said, you can always shim the hinges just to move them back. It just depends on how big of a gap I'm going to have here between the front of the door and the front fender. So if I've got a slighter gap there, I can always shim the door backwards. Anyway, we'll maybe throw that fender on and see what we're looking like. Alright guys, quick update for you. Just about 8:30, and nothing too exciting video-wise. It's really just a matter of tweaking here and there, taking the fender off a million times, doing a little bit of trimming here and there, rebolting it up, seeing if it works. So I've got it fitting pretty close now on the front and on the rear. The rear gap's not too bad. So that's what that looks like. I still haven't fastened the bottom here of the fender yet, but we're getting closer on the front. I do need to take the fender off again, and I figure I'm going to trim a little bit down here on the inside of the fender, because I think it's just hitting the interior of the sill. So just a little piece here on the bottom I'm going to trim off the inside so I can push this flat against. We're getting close. You can see it's fairly close. I do need to work on the gap a little bit at the bottom, probably move the door hinge this way a little bit. or move it back that way. Again, shim it back that way a little bit. So anyway, it's getting closer. I'm not trying to get the gaps perfect. I'm really more looking at this area first, trying to get that pretty good. I'm happy with the way this fits back here now. So if I can get this to fit a little bit better, I'm going to call this one done until we get the patch panel and put that in. Hopefully the patch panel is not going to change the proportion of this fender. I don't think it will. So anyway, we'll keep, I'm going to take this one off again for, I don't know, the 10th time I guess, and see if I can do a little trimming behind it and see if I can get that to tuck in a little bit better. Alright, we made it to the weekend. Happy Friday, everyone. Tush coming at you. Unfortunately, sometimes you got to work on the daily drivers, so today we're putting on some brake pads on the 2016 Sentra SR. So yeah, I don't like working on my daily drivers, but sometimes it's a necessary evil. So I've been struggling to keep the old Pathfinder on the road recently, and that needs some work as well, but we'll hopefully get to that before it gets too cold outside to work on it outside, because these cars don't fit in the garage very well, especially with this car in the way. Anyway, see if we can get those brake pads done quickly. Well, garages must love doing brake jobs these days. It's not that hard and it doesn't take a lot of time, and they charge a lot of money for what they do. Anyway, these pads are actually in pretty good shape. There's a lot of meat left on them, but they were noisy as hell, so I went ahead and changed them out anyway while I had the new pads with me. So we'll keep these. Maybe we'll put them on towards the end of the life of the car. Let somebody else deal with the squeaks. Anyway, we're going to take it for a spin around the block just to make sure everything's working okay. And then we'll move on to something else. Hey, good morning guys. Tush coming at you. Saturday, November the 4th, just after 10 a.m. And we've got the old portable workstation set up out in the driveway. What we're going to do today, or this morning at least, is we're going to take this old grimy transmission and give it a good cleaning, as we're going to go visit Ellen today at his shop and throw this on his newly built test rig and see if my A-type overdrive works as it should. So I'd rather clean that up than bring it down in its current condition. We'll take a bit of a shot of it when I get it out into the light on the driveway. But we're going to scrub this down, make it look a little bit better, and we'll deliver it nice and shiny to Ellen for his test, as opposed to looking in the state it's in now. That's the plan anyway. Alright guys, here's a quick look of what it looks like before the cleanup job. I can see here that there's a wire that leads to nowhere, which is kind of interesting, so I'll have to check that connection out, but obviously not connected. And there's some other suspect connections, like right here. This is just barely hanging on here, so we're gonna have to rewire this anyway, but just thought I'd give you a quick look of that all wired up. This obviously goes to the switch up, or to the wiring up behind the dash, and up to the overdrive switch on the column. So anyway, there's what she looks like, and if you recall, it has this very strange looking gearbox fill plug that's been welded into the case. So I guess that was to fill it up easier. It must have had lots of leaks. Anyway, we'll get it cleaned up as best as possible. Like I said, we'll try to get it down to Ellen's about between noon and 1 today for a quick test on his rig. So let's see what we can do to get it cleaned up. I'm going to use a variety of cleaners, including an engine degreaser, probably brake cleaner. I've got Pour 15 degreaser, which I quite like. So we'll do that, followed with some probably Windex to clean up the residue after that. Alright guys, that's it for now. Alright guys, there's about an hour of scrubbing there. It's much better, but still not up to my standards, but good enough to get it down and get it tested at least, and then we'll continue to do some work on it. After we make sure everything's okay, we may have to disassemble this if it doesn't check out. I know a guy that knows a thing or two about overdrives now, so I'm not too worried about that. But anyway, we'll take it down to Ellen and see if we can throw this on the test stand for us this afternoon. I'll bring the camera along so you can see it in action. Alright, we're at Ellen's shop, and we've got my A-type overdrive up on the bench, and we're just going to do a few little checks, some electrical checks first before we hook it up to the motor here to run it up. And Ellen's got a new pressure gauge that we're going to attach to it at some point. There's the man. This guy is tagged along to learn a thing or two. a thing or two more about Triumph. So, you know, this is going to be Les's future. He's going to just ditch all the Capris and XR4s and get into a real car eventually. So anyway, he's gonna learn. That's what he's here for. So initially we were just checking the solenoid, and the solenoid on my Overdrive is not working. Working. But we got power to the battery. So anyway, so we're thinking that this little wire here had a bit of a crimp in it, so we can get it to work kind of on and off. But we're just going to clean up that connection and see if that works. The plunger does move up and down, so it's not seized at least. So anyway, we think it's just this little wire here. We've got the top of the solenoid off, and we've got a little bit of kind of a faulty wire in here. We can get it to work occasionally. We're doing a little jiggling. Yeah. And there's a lot of play in the top piece on the solenoid, so.
Can't make it work on camera now. And they're gonna think we're lying it works.
And one little stray little wire here. So we have the solenoid working now. So you can see the little piston moving and moving the switch.
Oops. Still works.
Yeah.
Don't show that on camera.
Too late. Okay. Okay, so I forgot where I left off, but all the switches have been checked now. The solenoid does work. We've got the pressure gauge installed, and we're just hooking up the electric motor with the pulley. There's the pressure gauge. There's the pulley on the shaft of the transmission and the electric motor. So we're getting pretty close to giving her a shot. That's your underwear, Les?
These are from Kazakhstan.
All right, here we go. All right, so take a picture of the side of the gauge here, and we're going to activate the solenoid. There we go, drops temporarily and then back up. So that seems to be operating okay. Yep. De-energize it. Yep. Okay. Energize it. There we go.
When can I do a power shift, though?
Wow. Pretty cool. Okay, energize it. Alright. So we've got the car running in 4th gear. That one's got a little RPM gauge here just on the output input shaft. We're going to see if we can actually get it to operate and see what RPM we're running.
That won't really work well.
Yeah. 1759.
Just one side or both the man?
Just the yellow.
Yellow.
Ready? Three. Yes?
Well, now it's changed.
26.
I haven't powered it yet.
Okay. Power it up now. Same thing.
Okay, energize it one more time. There you go.
You visually see how
Yeah.
it
Yeah. All right. Alright, good morning guys. Tush coming at you Sunday, November the 5th, just after 11:15 in the morning. Good day yesterday at Ellen's shop, and we managed to get the, or confirm that the A-type is working correctly, or the overdrive unit is working correctly. Did some playing around with the solenoid. It was a little bit sticky and a little bit dodgy. Some of the wiring under the cap was a little suspect, so we managed to get that corrected. Did some rewiring on the top switches as well. Fired it onto the to the stand and operated the solenoid, and everything seems to be checking out okay as it should. So happy that that's tested and ready to pretty much go back in the car. I'm going to clean that up a little bit more as mentioned, but yeah, happy that that's working properly, and thanks to Ellen for letting me borrow his test rig to check that. That's a big relief not to have that rebuilt. For now anyway, we're going to stick it back in the car and play around with it. We don't know whether it shifts gears or not. Obviously we can shift it on the test stand, but getting in the car and under power is another story. Anyway, back to the fender fitment, and I never did get around to repairing this rear flange section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that today while I can. I'm going to pop this rear fender off, and I'm going to play around with welding up those holes that I talked about previously and drilling new holes as required. So I'm going to get to that. I'm going to stop talking and get to work. Alright guys, so here's what that rear flange looks like. So this hole is not required. See, I've put a little X here. We've got a little stress fracture here, and we've got some rust through here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this flange just below this rust out portion all the way up to here, and we're going to remove this and we're going to make a new flange and weld it in. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to cut that area out. Alright guys, Tush coming back at you. It's now Tuesday, November the 7th at 8 p.m. in the evening. I guess that's what PM means. Anyway, I'm having a hard time making any progress on this car. So started working on this on Sunday and got called away, so had to sort of drop the tools, and it's taken me till tonight to get back out here. So we're planning on fixing this flange tonight. If nothing else goes wrong and I'm not called away, we'll endeavor to get this fixed tonight. So at least try to make a little bit of forward progress. Anyway, so we're going to make this patch. I've got the old piece here, and you can see it's a little worse for wear. So we'll use this to make a template, and we will, how's this go, something like that. So we'll endeavor to make a new piece to go in there and see if I can still weld. It's been a while since I've actually welded anything, so that'll be fun. Anyway, we'll come back. Alright guys, not very exciting, but progress to report nonetheless. So we have a new flange and new bolt holes drilled. In order to do that, I had to result in getting some strip caulking out. So what I did is I put the strip caulking along the flange and then held the fender up against it, pushed the fender against the flange to reveal where the bolt holes should be, and then I marked them out with marker, removed the strip caulking, and then drilled where the fasteners were going to go. So there you go. So just a little tip. Didn't have any plasticine, that could have worked, but the strip caulking works just as well. Anyway, so going in the right direction, got something done finally. Alright guys, now that we've got that flange looking better, we're going to attack this little piece here, and there's a wider shot of it. So obviously you can see a crack along this flange piece. There's not much left of it, so we're going to try to get to the bottom of that. I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to lift this piece off here, off the bottom. So I'll grind that piece down and add a new flange piece here and weld it up to the top. That's what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to do a little bit more investigation. It's pretty ugly along this this whole seam here, so we'll get that looking a little bit better. Alright, just a quick shot of what lies behind that piece. So I'm actually quite surprised there's actually even any metal back in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Dremel grinding disc out and just clean up that area and see how that metal is in there before we go ahead and create a new flange piece here that we can weld to this top piece. Anyway, just thought I'd give you a quick look at that before we go ahead with the rest of the repair. Alright, just a quick shot of that inner flange cleaned up, and what we're going to do now is we're going to hit it with some rust converter, and then we're going to hit it with some weld through primer, zinc primer, and then we're going to create a patch and fab that in there. Alright guys, so the flange is now repaired. It's repaired basically from here all the way up to here. So obviously we drilled the hole a little larger. We actually drilled the flange piece around the hole, or we filed the piece around the hole to make it fit. We plug welded it 3 times in here to keep that tight to the inner fender. So I think that looks a lot better. It's a lot more structurally sound, no more holes. So a little bit of Bondo in that area and we should be good to go. Alright, on to the next part. Alright guys, the next thing I'm going to do now that I've got the flange sort of fixed up here on the body tub, I'm going to go back and take a look at the fenders now and figure out where the holes in the body tub line up with the holes in the fenders. And I've just put a black mark on the holes that are lining up. So you can see the first 3 at the rear of the fender line up, but then we run into a problem here where somebody's just drilled a hole at the front. So none of the front marks line up. I'm assuming that these were the original fender bolt holes, here, and here, but obviously someone's drilled them somewhere else and they match now on the body tub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically close up or plug weld these ones that are not part of the holes drilled in the tub, and I'm going to enlarge the ones that are and put the little clips in, and we're going to see if we can get this fender fastened 100% with every bolt. That's the goal anyway, is to get this thing completely on the car in the spot that it's supposed to be. So we're going to work on the fender. We'll fix a little bit of flange, missing flange pieces while we're at it. We'll maybe grind down a little bit where some repairs have already been done really poorly. And we'll figure out this hole at the front here. I'm a little concerned that the first hole is fairly far back from the B-post, so we may try to locate a hole for this bolt hole to capture on the body tub as well. Anyway, we'll come back. Alright guys, I've cleaned up the fender flange a little bit, and it's good to see some red oxide primer in some places, which is good. The metal's fairly good underneath. You can see the sections that I've cut out, so I've cut out 2 sections along here where I'm going to replace the flange pieces. Here they are here. So we're going to get some fresh metal in there. We'll weld that in, and then we'll go back to filling and drilling holes. Alright guys, we've got the flange repaired, and I think it looks pretty good. Repaired from about here to here, and then repaired from about here to there. And we've got all the, I think these are called Tinnerman nuts, receivers for the bolts that go through the fenders attached where I think they need to be. Obviously I haven't filled the extra holes at the front here. Again, I may leave this one as it is, but we'll see. So I may only have to fill 2, but we're going to make sure that this fits first of all before we do any more modifications to the fender. Alright guys, we'll come back. Alright guys, just coming up to about 7:45, and got the fender fitting not too bad. The door gap is pretty good. The fitment to the sill is pretty good. The fender is now bolted up at all locations except for the bottom here. I need to do some work on the bottom fitment. I've got to drill a hole in this fender to be able to catch that Tinnerman nut down there. And pretty much everything else fits. I've got the missing one fastener here. It's going to pull this in a little bit, but for the most part that doesn't look too bad at the back. Remember that there's going to be a beading that goes in this gap, so I'm not too concerned about it. It is a little wavy. It's had a ton of work. I did clear all this Bondo out of here, and you can see how much welding has been done in here and in back in here. So it just continues the ugliness, but anyway, we'll make that look better with a little skim coat of Bondo back over that once we do this repair properly. So yeah, it's fitting not too bad. It's fitting a lot better than what it was when I got it. So we're definitely going in the right direction. So I think what I'm going to do now is unbolt the fender, and I'm going to start working on that lower mounting spot. Alright, I dug out the good fenders so I could see what the bottom is supposed to look like on my fender. So I'm supposed to have a fixing point here with a very small sort of lip turned over at the bottom, and that lip meets the inner sill. So on mine I've got a much wider turnover, and I've got a little tiny fastening point down here, which is wrong. So I should have a point in the middle of this fender here that fastens, so it looks like that on the outside. So what I need to do is I need to create that, and then that gets screwed into here, as I mentioned. So I've made a few marks here and here. This is the edge of the side of the sill, so I'm going to be able to measure in and figure out where that mark needs to be, or whether that drill mark needs to be in this area somewhere. So I'm going to do that now. Alright guys, we've got that fastener in there down the bottom now. As you can see, that sill seems to fit pretty well now. It's pretty much hugging the inner sill. The fender is hugging the inner sill as far as the shape is concerned. The only issue I think I might have a little bit is just this gap here on the inner sill. I think the sill needs to go towards the back of the car a little bit. I want to kind of line it up. If you see the door, where the door ends, I think I want to bring the sill back to here, and that would be pretty good. I mean, the door gap is very even all the way up, and like I said, I can bring this door back a little bit. I can shim the hinges to come back a little bit to close that gap. It is a little tighter at the top, but it's pretty even the rest of the way down, so that's not too bad. But like I said, I think I'm going to want to just bring that sill back a little bit. I've got a little room to work with at the front. It's a little bit tight at the front, so I think the sill can afford to come back about 1/4 inch. So I think we're probably going to do that. This is not fastened yet, so that's what we're doing on all these fit checks. So I think what we'll do is I've got to take the sill off anyway at some point before I go ahead and spot weld it in there. But I think, like I said, what we'll do is we'll move it back. We'll do another fit check before we do the final welding. But it's looking better. It's coming together. So just thought I'd give you a quick shot of that. I think we're done for the evening. We're probably going to go in, and we'll try to get back out here tomorrow. All right, have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching.